Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everman's Odyssey podcast. I'm your host, Cole McClure. Uh, Recently, we've gone through a string of biblically and faith-based content, and that's been a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot, and we're certainly going to keep doing that. But I wanted to take a break from that and shift our focus a little bit, and I'd like to, on this episode, discuss the issue of homelessness. Now, wherever you are, and most certainly, if you live in my home state of California, you have at least observed an issue of homelessness likely in your community. And it's certainly something that is an epidemic, a crisis, and with a myriad of causes and really no one universal guaranteed solution. And now, of course, we're not going to discuss policies or come up with the fix for all of this in this podcast episode, but rather I'd like to take some time and talk about the experiences that I've had and the perspective that I've gained on this issue. So for a little bit of background, I work for the city that I live in as a homeless liaison officer. And what that means is basically it's my job to contact everybody who may be experiencing homelessness within the city limits. And that can be a pretty daunting task just finding everybody and making that initial contact. But beyond that, it is my responsibility to find out, their story, what led them to being homeless, what's keeping them homeless, and what are some of their experiences or barriers to regaining safe and stable housing, whether that be just getting them in touch with our local shelter so they can get a bed there and have some caseworkers assigned and get that process started, or whether it's making sure that they're receiving the food stamps or Social Security benefits that they're entitled to. Often if you run into homeless veterans, you need to get them in touch with the local Veteran Service Office, make sure that they have a claim filed for disability and or pension, and get them in touch with the resources that are best suited to them. And of course, oftentimes there are individuals with substance abuse issues, and we can schedule those first appointments, often even provide transportation to get them to those recovery appointments and get them back on track to the life that they could be living. And so already in my short time in this position, and in a very small town of roughly 14,000 people, I've already contacted over 250 homeless individuals and have tried to get their story and how we can help them. For some, that means getting them back to where their family is. Some people end up stranded, whether they be from Virginia or Alaska or just somewhere else in the state, and they don't have a way to get home. We can find transportation as long as we make sure that they have that family connection and they're going to be taken care of when they get home. And as difficult and demanding and busy of a job as this can be, I absolutely love it. I'm very fortunate and honored to have this position where I can, represent our community and our city government and work hard to help people and hopefully make a difference in their lives and get them back on track. And so that's where I'm coming from, is having this experience, basically being a field representative for all resources and agencies in the area, trying to contact everybody and figure out what they need and how to get them there. And so with my professional background out of the way there, I'd like to cover some basic statistics that give a broad picture of the situation of homelessness in America and in California specifically. So California has an estimated 186,000 homeless people. And that is based on the most recent point in time count. And these are notoriously vastly undercounts. It is obviously hard to contact everybody based on, terrain or demographics, or some individuals just not wanting to be contacted. So that 186,000, while it's most likely an undercount, it represents a third of all unhoused individuals in the country living here in California. And of that 186,000 homeless individuals, the state has less than 75,000 shelter beds to offer. So at this point, with that approach, there's just no way, even if you could find everybody, get cooperation, we don't have bed space available for everybody. And now, it's certainly not all homeless individuals are experiencing homelessness directly because of drug addiction. You can't talk about homelessness in America without talking about the issue of opiate addiction. And so just in America, nearly 50 million Americans admit to struggling with either drug or alcohol abuse. And those categories are almost split 50-50. And so over 100,000 people in America died from drug overdose last year. And that's even with a 10% decrease over the year before. And that decrease is likely attributed to the wide availability and distribution of naloxone or Narcan. And Narcan is something that I give out almost on a daily basis because there are so many people who are overdosing almost on a daily basis. And so they have to have somebody nearby or with a friend who can bring them back from that overdose with the naloxone. And so, like I said, while the drug overdose statistics are extremely relevant to the issue of homelessness, there are a lot of factors that can lead to someone being homeless, whether that be mental health. Some people struggle with mental health to the point that they cannot maintain a job or maintain their own living space and don't have a family or a support structure in place to help them deal with those issues. We've seen frequently in our area here fire victims, people who lost their homes due to wildfire, and whether it be because home insurance is taking a while to pick up that claim, or they didn't have the home paid off, or they were renting, whatever it is, there's been a lot of individuals who lost their home due to a fire and have been waiting years to get that resolved. And when you don't have any of your belongings, you don't have family connections, it can be hard to pick yourself up and move on from that. And you'll also see a lot of scenarios where it's from family units being broken up. The husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, they split. Sometimes there's kids involved. So one group will stay in the home and the other one leaves. Or, let's say, for instance, the husband leaves. Now he's homeless or he's just off somewhere else, and that household lost a big chunk or maybe even all of their income, so they can no longer maintain their housing. So now the whole family becomes homeless, even if they're separated. And this could also involve, domestic violence situations. I've met plenty of young women and some with children who were running from their abuser and had no place to go, but they couldn't go home, so they were hiding under a bridge until someone could make that connection and get them in touch with the right resources, or maybe reach out and find a family member who could help. But there's a lot of reasons that could lead to someone being homeless, and they're not always what you assume. And now going back to some of the functions that I perform as a part of my job, that'll often include getting food, water, medicine, hygiene items, taking that from donations or from the shelter and distributing that to more isolated camps to make sure that these individuals at least have the basic needs, while we continue to build that rapport and build that relationship to work on their long-term success. I want to make sure that, as much as we can, we ensure their safety and their ability to survive another day, to have that hope to get better in the future. However, I have noticed sometimes I'll get remarks from other individuals in the community, or I'll see things online. And sometimes it's exactly this, but usually it's some version of the phrase, don't feed the bears, implying that we shouldn't be feeding or enabling homeless people because it's just going to attract more, and you're rewarding, bad behavior, and you don't want to attract this type of thing to your community. And I think that's more of what I want to focus on in this episode. This concept of don't feed the bears. Don't feed those people, or don't feed that group. Don't take care of them. It's their own fault. And so I would like this episode to be just kind of a frank reminder. There's a lot of reasons people are homeless, and a lot of times it is absolutely their own fault, especially when you talk about chronic homelessness. People get into bad habits or give up hope, and there are things that they could have done by now to fix their situation. However, it's still human beings that we're talking about. I'm not out there passing out food and hygiene kits to bears. I am trying to help human beings who are suffering. And some of that suffering you could not possibly imagine. Some of the stories I've heard are just heartbreaking. Guys who grew up with no parents and did everything they could to stay out of gangs or drugs and didn't really have any role model to figure out how to get through life, or women who had been abused or raped at a young age and trying to figure out how to trust anybody and move on and be a normal member of society. Or I've talked to individuals who, the first time that they tried drugs, they were 12 years old and their mom made them do it because it was a rite of passage. Their mom sold meth, their grandma sold meth, and so that was the family business. And so they gained an addiction as a birthday present when they were a kid. And I can't imagine having to go through something like that and then being torn apart as an individual and being seen as, less than human, or having so much less worth than other individuals. I certainly do get frustrated because there are a lot of people that I want to help who just don't want help. And you can tell that, they're on a track that is going to lead to an early death, or they're, consistently committing, these small crimes to just get by. And it's so frustrating. But you have to remember, it could have been you, given a different set of circumstances. And that's not always the case. Like I said, there is that handful of people who just want to rebel against any sort of system, don't want to be a part of society, for whatever reason, got into some sort of substance abuse or life or crime and have no desire to get out of it. But lumping everybody into that category is incorrect and unfair to the countless people that you will drive by every day and not know their story. And that's something I've struggled with now that I've been in a position to talk to so many different people and hear so many stories. Like I said, there's a handful of people that I get angry with every day, and it's so frustrating that I can't help them because they don't want it. And then there's that other side where you just feel like, I'm racing against the clock trying to get them to understand that there is hope and there is purpose and there is help, and that they are worthy of that, and they just have to make that choice and get them to see that before it's too late. And so I wish that more people got this opportunity to talk to people. And, we all have that opportunity. We get busy. And obviously, this is my full-time job now, and I'm very grateful for that. But anybody could go down to, a park in your town, or by a bus stop, or whatever it is, wherever in your community that there are people who are homeless or suffering or in need. We all have that opportunity to go hear their story and understand them a little bit better. And I think we owe that to to them and to ourselves also, to provide a little bit more humility that, it's not just because you're so great and they're so awful that the circumstances landed the way that they are. It very easily could have been me, could have been you, could have been anybody else. And so we should be very grateful for not being in that position. But it certainly puts a bit of responsibility on us to help our fellow man. And now, of course, I wasn't going to get through a whole episode, especially one about how we approach and deal with those less fortunate, without having some sort of biblical reference. So I did want to read this scripture here from the book of Matthew. This is just after Jesus speaks on the parable of talents. It is Matthew 25, verses 35 through 40. And it says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." And that's just a reminder, especially if you're a person of faith, when you see people in this situation, they're not just losers. They're not just forgettable, unworthy people. They are God's children, and they are an opportunity for you to bless them and to bless God and to do the work that you are called to do. And anytime you are performing a service to these people, you are performing a service to God. And now, if you're not a person of faith, the golden rule is still kind of universal without necessarily foundational faith system. If that's not something that you participate in, treat others as you want to be treated. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't say treat others how they treat you. It doesn't say treat others how you feel they deserve. It's just treat others the way that you would like to be treated. And so if you were struggling and in the absolute worst season of your life, would you want someone to judge you? Or would you want someone to remind you that you are loved and you have purpose and potential and hope and the power to make better choices and the power to improve your life and to move on? That's what we should be looking at. And of course, another thing that we like to cover on this podcast is Stoic philosophy. And so there's a great one from Seneca, and it says, "Wherever there is a human being, there's an opportunity for kindness." And that is certainly a great thing. And I think that's something that most people try to apply in their daily lives. I think sometimes we can be a little bit stingy with that. And this isn't coming from a place of judgment. This is coming from me having to evaluate my own heart during this process of this new job and finding out what so many people are going through that you never know. So you might be way off base on your assumptions, but you'll never be wrong to show somebody kindness. And that's such an important message that is so applicable in so many areas of our lives. But this is just something that's been weighing on me recently with the amount of suffering and hopelessness that I see in this demographic, and then to see the anger and hatred and dehumanization from those of us who have not experienced homelessness. And so, this would certainly be a reminder. And if it convicts you, good, examine your heart, because it is human beings. Just like any other demographic, some of these people have done really bad things. But the overwhelming majority are just in a really bad place and doing self-destructive things because they weren't taught any better, or they've lost hope and they feel, less human and undignified. And if you're not part of the solution there, then you are part of the problem. And that's common among community problems. If you see a problem in your community and you're not part of the solution and you're complaining about the problem, you are part of the problem. So from a personal standpoint and in your own heart, examine your perspective and the way that you think about these people who are human beings, who are somebody's, son or daughter. I've talked to, the parents of some of these individuals who are on the streets and struggling with drug addiction or mental health, and it just can break an entire family. And it's hard to know what to do. No matter what situation you're in, no matter what your relationship is to that person, it can be so overwhelming and feel so ill-equipped to help that person. And so don't be so quick to judge. So evaluate yourself there and look at your community. And if you see a problem, find out what it needs and find out how you fit into that equation. Some of us may not be financially equipped to just take somebody under our wing or, make these huge financial donations to organizations, nonprofits, whatever it is. But you can volunteer your time. You can, donate some old clothing or food items, or go talk to somebody who's homeless in that town that you feel comfortable and safe approaching, get their story and find out what they need specifically. And of course, above all, I certainly would encourage you to be safe about it. Don't go, under a bridge downtown in the middle of the night and strike up a conversation, because you just never know. Be smart, be compassionate, be kind, and figure out what you can do to help. Like I said, if you're a person of faith, pray. Because if an entire community had a right, humble heart towards its most vulnerable and suffering people in its community, then that community would absolutely see change. And not 100%. Like I said, there are some situations where I don't believe that anybody is beyond help. But there are people who just aren't ready. And that's where you just have to keep engaging and be that positive interaction. And now, obviously, some of this is left up to things like law enforcement to help motivate some of those changes. And we have, medical systems and mental health systems and law enforcement agencies that are doing their best to address this issue, and everybody cares and everybody wants to help. But this goes beyond a government solution, and that's something we've talked on the podcast before, is if you see a problem in your community, the community needs to be part of that solution. And just saying that, like, oh, well, I'm a taxpayer, so that's my contribution to the solution, is now I expect my government to go out and do everything that should be done and in the most efficient and effective way possible because I gave them my tax dollars. There's certainly an expectation and accountability that needs to be there for government agencies to ensure that that money is being spent wisely and that the problem is being addressed. But that doesn't mean that you're off the hook and you don't have to do anything else. So, I don't know, maybe today, tomorrow, take a look at your community and see where the need is and figure out how you can fit in and maybe give some thought to what somebody might be going through when you see somebody having a mental health crisis walking down the street, or you see somebody, in a tent on the side of the road. Think past the surface and what would it take to get you into that scenario, and how would you get out if you had nobody? And like I said, this is not coming from a place of judgment. I'm not condemning anybody. These are things that I've had to go through and think about and struggle with on a daily basis as I do my very best to help in the capacity that I can. And so I just wanted to pass on that perspective, and so that we could all work together to solve this. And whatever that might look like, it starts with people. And so I hope this helps you, and I hope that you take this and use this as you go throughout your day. Well, thanks so much for listening to this, guys. I really appreciate it. Take care.